Good morning, everyone. I thought I would end this video with a bit of a witchy book recommendation chat and talk about some of my favorite witchy books that I've read over the past few falls and talk about the book that I am currently reading. So right now I'm reading The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I am gonna be completely honest, I'm really struggling to get through this book. I am a little bit close to the halfway point. I can probably only read about one chapter at a time because it's just so boring. I feel like it's just a whole book of nothing really happening. The characters are boring, they're not interesting. It just seems very cliche, very basic, predictable. There's no edginess in it, and I do like to have a feel-good cleanser every now and then when it comes to my books. Like, I read Legends and Lattes, and that's a cozy fantasy, but I felt like that was far more interesting than this book, so I am not sure if I'm going to be able to get through it. I am trying to. This book does have a lot of good reviews. I see a lot of people talk about it on social media, but I just think it's so boring. So we'll see if I'm able to get through it. So next I want to talk about a book that I read earlier this year. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, but I did buy the physical copy, and it's called The Witch of Versailles by Jessica Mason, and it is a bigger book. I actually read it on my Kindle and then went and bought it, but this book is so good. I absolutely loved it. One of my favorite things is blending fantasy or witchcraft with historical fiction, and this book absolutely did that. So this book is about Claude Devine, and she ends up working her way up through the Parisian society and becomes a servant and lover to Madame de Montespan, who is a mistress of Louis the 16th. I think I have my correct Louis. He's the Sun King. He's the one that turned Versailles from a hunting lodge to the palace that we know today. This is based on a person. This Claude really did exist, and it's based on the infamous Affair of the Poisons, where tons and tons of women and ladies at the court were poisoning their husbands, poisoning their enemies, and a lot of fortune tellers and herbalists and healers and midwives that are outside of the palace ended up all being hunted down, prosecuted, and unfortunately losing their lives because of this huge scandal. So this is the first book. Apparently there's a second one coming out that is going to talk more about how the Affair of the Poisons actually happened. So this is kind of the origin story of Claude, but it's really good. There is some steamy scenes in it, so I do want to warn you that there is some sapphic, steamy things that occur in this book, but it wasn't overwhelming because I normally don't like to read things like that, and I didn't find it overwhelming or to the point that I felt like it was the entire plot line, but this was really good. I would absolutely read this book again, and it was definitely a 5-star read. I have another 5-star read, and this is Cackle by Rachel Harrison, and this is about a teacher who moves out of the city to a small town and ends up befriending a very interesting woman who the townspeople seem to be intimidated by, scared of, but also in awe of, and she has a lot of witchy powers. She has a lot of friends that happen to be spiders, and I just loved this book so much. I actually had to go and buy a second copy of this because I loaned my first one out to my friend and didn't get it back, and I wanted to have it because it was a 5-star read and I just absolutely loved it, and I never know when I'm just going to pick this up and reread it again, because I remember sitting here and reading it, I think it was last year or the year before, and thinking I can't wait to reread this book. And this is just one of those books that if you could reread it again for the first time, this is one of those books. So I really, really like this. Highly, highly recommend. So the next one I have is Garden Spells by Sarah Addison Allen, and I did finish this book this year, but I started it last year. I had a hard time getting through this book as well, but it is much better than the book that I'm currently reading, and it does have some drama, a little bit more edge to it, and it has feel-good vibes, but it's not all feel-good vibes. There are some themes of domestic abuse in this book, but it's very light and not overly dark. And I know there is a second book that is similar to this called The First Frost. I'm not sure if I would read that though, because I didn't absolutely love this book, and I did feel like this book was kind of cliche and kind of predictable. But again, I like having some feel-good books as palate cleansers, so this was a good palate cleanser. So the next book is not necessarily a witch book per se, but it is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and there is a princess who's the third-born daughter, and she has to go rescue her sister from a very unfortunate and not great marriage, and she enlists the help of a witch or wise woman, and there's a lot of fantasy themes in this book, and I loved it. There is a demonic chicken, and I don't know, there was something about this demonic chicken that I just thought was so funny. But I read this at the beginning of 2024, right before I got laid off from work. I loved it. It was my favorite book that I read last year. I read it on Kindle Unlimited, and then I bought this in the bookstore because I knew I wanted to read this again. I really love T. Kingfisher. I just read another book by her that was like a horror fantasy book, and I have 2 other books in my stack, A Sorceress Comes to Call and Hemlock and Silver. So I'm hoping to read those by her this year, but they're not necessarily witchy books. But this one is a pretty good one if you want something that has a witch, that's fantasy, but not necessarily about witches. So I do have another witchy recommendation, and I don't have the book anymore because, again, I loaned it out to a friend and I never got it back. So I'm gonna pull up my Goodreads. So Hester by Lori Lyko Albanese. Not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. I really, really loved this book. This again was witchcraft meets historical fiction, and this was about a seamstress who traveled over to New England from Scotland in the 1800s. She ends up living in Salem. She runs into Nathaniel Hawthorne, and she has some unusual gifts when it comes to being a seamstress, and she can see certain things in colors. So it's been a while since I read this book. I finished it in November of 2022, so I can't remember everything about it, but I did really, really like it. The thing that I liked about it was that her witch powers were different than what you would typically see from a witch just anywhere in media and books and TV and television, and I really enjoyed that. And I would love to read this again, so I think the next time I go to a bookstore, if I see it, I'm just gonna pick it up and get a second copy, since I don't think I'm going to get the one I lent back. So I do have a nonfiction book to recommend, and it's called A History of Women in Medicine, Cunning Women, Physician, and Witches. So this nonfiction book takes you back to pre-Christian times where healers and cunning women were really respected in their communities. It talks about certain grave goods that we find when we're doing archaeological digs and discovering some of these women. It goes up into, I If I remember correctly, it goes through the witchcraft trials, not just here in America, but in Europe as well. It goes over a lot of primary sources, written material, archaeological evidence. It's a really great high-level overview about healing and medicine and how it's been linked to the supernatural or spirituality. And it shows how healers and midwives and medicine women kind of transitioned into getting this stereotype of being witches that we see in media and in the present day. I love reading about the history of medicine and healing because there are a lot of supernatural elements to it. So I just find that stuff fascinating, and that's actually something that I want to learn more about. So this is something that I read last year that kind of gave me that higher level. So if you're interested in the real aspects of healing and witchcraft and kind of where all of these folklores and tales come from in our fiction books, then I would recommend this one as a primer and a high level overview into that subject. So that's all of the witchy book recommendations I have for you. So if you have any witchy book recommendations that I didn't mention in this video, put them in the comments below because I'm always looking for more witchy, fantasy, historical fiction books to read. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!